Welcome back. Morna Ikhosa's article, The Importance of Menstrual Leave in Organizations, a Step Towards Gender Equity, highlights the need for workplaces to adopt menstrual leave policies to support employees who menstruate. This initiative not only addresses health concerns, but also promotes inclusivity and productivity within organizations. By recognizing menstrual health as a legitimate workplace issue, companies can foster a more equitable environment. Now, Morna joins us this evening to elaborate a bit further on the topic. Morna, good evening and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Nina.
Thank you so much for being here.
Yes.
To start with, what inspired you to look into, the matter of menstrual leave and, to write this article on it?
So at the beginning of this month, I started or dedicated myself to write about issues that affect women at work. And for some reason as well, in the month of October, I had very interesting menstrual periods. I had brain fog, I was fatigued, and I couldn't quite understand. And so I was thinking to myself, do I tell my boss that obviously I'm not sick per se, but I'm also not okay? And so it sort of started making me think, is there such a thing as menstrual leave? And then I started researching, and I came across a few articles that really indicated that there are countries that give menstrual leave. And also the fact that I know that there are women that really have very painful menstrual cycles. Some have endometriosis, which is a menstrual health issue or disease. And I was also thinking about them. How do they cope? There's some that drink painkillers, but when they're at work, they're not productive. Obviously, they're drowsy because of the medication. So I was really also advocating for those ladies.
Yeah. Of course, when you raise a topic of this nature, there'll be opposing views or opposing understanding of the topic, and so forth. Some might say, what would constitute this as a serious need for medical need for leave to be instituted? Why can't it just be taken as another sick day, sick or leave day, etc.? What do you have to say about that?
Okay, so if about 10 to 15% of women around the world have these dysmenorrhea and endometriosis, like really painful medical conditions related to menstrual cycles. So that's the first one. The second one is, I honestly don't think it's fair, and we're going back to the issue around equity, that I must take my sick leave, which is about, I think, 100 days for 3 years, but the men don't need to. They would use sick leave for, maybe something else, but then I would have used up my sick leave just for menstrual, and when I really need sick leave for other things, then I can't, take it. So I just think that it's important that we realize that women are designed differently. We give birth. I mean, there was a comment that was made on one of the groups that said, we actually are life givers. And so we are not the same in terms of biological design. So it's important that we recognize that there are features such as menstrual that have impact on productivity, and then we need to find a way to accommodate it.
Yeah. Of course, another question that would come up is, productivity.
Correct.
If this is instituted, how does it affect productivity versus, the opposite end of that stick? What do you have to say on that?
So what's interesting is that a lot of people make sentiments around the woman will be less productive.
Yeah.
However, if you there's not a lot of research that has proven that when especially countries that have already adopted menstrual leave, that productivity had gone down because they've given menstrual cycles. So that's the first one. So there's no data to substantiate that women will be less productive. In fact, women will be more productive because when you give them this day or whatever day they need, they come back more focused. It attracts talent, obviously. It also creates loyalty. So these women feel loyal to a company that would give them or appreciate or makes them feel inclusive within the workplace. So I think it's important that when employers are questioning the issue around productivity, that they actually base it on facts. I know many people, when the article came out, said, yeah, but if you have so many females, how would it work? In China, in fact, what they do is not all women go at the same time on their menstrual cycles, right? So they would plan it in advance, and they would know who goes when, and they would schedule it so that it doesn't impact on productivity. I think if there's anything, women usually give 120% usually at their work. So I don't see how having leave or menstrual leave would impact on their work.
Yeah, yeah. So there is a way to work around it, of course.
Yes.
I did also see some of the comments from this, social media group that you were speaking about. And what concerned me was that it came from females who are bosses in the workplace that were totally against this concept. What does this tell you about the types of conversations we as women should be having with our women bosses, or just in general?
Yeah, so in fact, even when the article came out, the most of the resistance actually came from women, which was quite surprising. And that's why you would find that even with the issue around the extension of maternity leave, you would find that, again, it's women who's against it. And I'm not too sure where that comes from, because a lot of the articles that I had researched, men were actually in support of women having menstrual leave. In fact, last week we had the Women in Mining Summit, and it was very refreshing to see that one of the managing director, Mr. Kaseta, acknowledged the fact that workplaces need to be more inclusive, having things like menstrual sanitary pads in bathrooms, for example, just to accommodate women, because sometimes your periods come in on a day you don't expect. So it's comforting to see that even in Zambia, where they've introduced Mother's Day, that it's more men who are in support, and they can understand their fellow mothers. But the reason why women are more resistant, I honestly don't know why. It's worth exploring.
Yeah, definitely. Of course, it's not all sunshine and roses. There are challenges, to implementing a policy such as this. And, the organizations will be the ones that deal with these challenges. So what do you foresee some of those challenges might be?
Look, menstrual leave, honestly, it looks beautiful on paper, but it's very complicated. It's very complicated and multifaceted. So I think there is a certain sensitivity required from the employers, but there's also a integrity required by the woman, because obviously there is room for abuse. Not all women experience the same intensity in terms of menstrual pain like others. Some have heavier bleeding days and some not. So it really would require, so for example, countries like Italy, their policy on menstrual leave is that it must be accompanied by a medical certificate to prove that you've got some condition and that you require the leave, and they give up to 3 days. So there are some mitigating factors that can help with controlling the abuse of the leave, but it is possible.
You've mentioned a couple of countries in your responses that have seemed to have implemented this successfully.
Correct.
Are there any African countries that have done this and is working for them that you know of?
So the only African country is Zambia. They have a day called Mother's Day. The practice was actually there since 1990, but it was only enacted in the law in 2019. And it's actually employers who refuse women to take mothers are actually prosecuted. So it's by law that a woman can call in and say, today I'm having my Mother's Day, and she shouldn't be questioned why. So if an African SADC country has considered it, I don't see why Namibia cannot.
Yeah. This is a very interesting topic of discussion, Morna. How do you envision the future of menstrual health discussions in the workplace going forward?
I'm hoping that the article, which I was actually surprised that it took off the way it did, is that it would open dialogue within organizations to talk about this. Because I think when we start these discussions, it kind of removes the taboo or the stigma that is associated with it. And it's true, sometimes you need to apply it case by case. It can't be an open blanket case. But I think it's time that we speak about issues around gender equity and not necessarily just gender equality, because women are expected to do the same work at the same intensity as men, but there's some biological factors, God-given, that does not always allow us to do that. And it's not because we want to be funny, like giving birth and having to have maternity leave. So it's important that really more of these discussions, especially on HR platforms, are discussed, and that HR people actually bring this to the fore, because this is actually their area.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you for being here this evening. Incredible article, an interesting article that you've written. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Nina. Thank you for having me.
Well, after this brief break, Conversations here on the Daily Roundup continues. Do stay with us.